I think self-compassion is the number one key to moving forward and healing when it comes to sexuality, because it's so easy to be hard on ourselves and it's so easy to want things to be different. But trusting that the timing is the way it needs to be, trusting that, everything is happening in a way that serves you, right? And so we can only go as fast as the slowest parts of us want to go. And I love that phrase because it really is so true. So the more you can just be compassionate and being like, wow, it's really uncomfortable for me to try to self-pleasure. What is that about? Well, maybe when I was a kid, I got in trouble for doing that once. Okay, well, that would make sense why it's hard for me now. How could I make an environment where it does feel good for me to explore my body in a way that feels safe and comfortable? And those can be like little ways to nourish, the shame or what else might arise as you are on the path to greater pleasure.
Welcome to Are You Satisfied? A podcast that explores what a deeply satisfying and fulfilling life looks like and how to live it. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Murphy, award-winning naturopathic doctor. I'm a passionate advocate that every human have the opportunity to live a life that is maximally healthy, uniquely authentic, and personally satisfying. So, are you truly satisfied? If you want more satisfaction out of life, then you're in the right place. Okay, everyone out there, today we have a very special episode that I think some of you have been waiting for. I know I have disappointed some of you by having a podcast called Are You Satisfied, where some of you think we're going to talk about sex. And this is not a sex podcast, as you have found out. But today we do have a special guest and we are going to talk about sex. So it's very exciting. Amanda Testa is a sex, love, and relationship expert and host of the Find Your Feminine Fire podcast. Her methods bridge ancient tantric tools combined with the latest in neuroscience to help busy, career-driven women reconnect to their bodies, their partners, and their sexual radiance. Using simple techniques, her clients have more confidence, feel amazing in their skin, enjoy more pleasure, take sex from a to-do to something they look forward to, and have better intimacy, harmony, and playfulness in their relationships. She believes that sexuality is the missing key in personal growth and development, and she believes that one's sexuality and sexual energy fuels creativity, confidence, and power, and is a vital part of your holistic health and vitality. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Sarah. Happy to be here.
I have so many questions. This is definitely not my topic of expertise. So how did you get into this in the first place?
Yes, that is a very good question. And I will just invite too anyone listening who's feeling like a little nervous, just know that that is a totally normal response to this topic because in our culture, we don't talk enough about it. So I appreciate you for opening the conversation. And in my own experience, I was raised in a very conservative Southern household, Southern Baptist. So sex was something we definitely did not talk about. Raised in the South, I was a debutante, all these things. People are always like, how did you go from being a Southern debutante to being a sex coach? Kind of the reason I went down this path is when I had my daughter, that was a huge transformation for me in so many ways, right? It was just overwhelming. It was amazing. It was exhausting. It was all the things. And when she was almost a year old, I just remember finding myself in this real deep pit. I wasn't diagnosed with postpartum depression, but I really feel like that was part of it because, as soon as I heard that first cry in the morning, I was immediately like, ugh, so irritated. And I just remember this one particular morning, I was walking to the bathroom and tripping over toys and just like, ugh, the only one that ever does anything around here, that kind of feeling. And I got to the mirror in the bathroom and I literally could not recognize myself. And I was like, this cannot be my life. I do not know what happened to me, but I, in that moment, made a commitment that I would just start following the breadcrumbs to help me find myself again and feel, like I had some energy. And so one of those breadcrumbs happened to be this online course I saw about spicing things up in the bedroom. And I was like, well, that surely couldn't hurt. Anyone with a small children around knows that can be a challenging area, and not to mention all the changes that happen in your body hormonally when you have a baby. So I was like, all right, let's give it a go. And I remember when I first signed up, I was mortified. I was like, please don't let anyone know I'm doing this. I'm just so embarrassed. And what I found through that program was it really had zero to do with spicing things up in the bedroom and everything to do with coming back home into your own body and yourself, kind of figuring out what feels good for you, finding that baseline of making sure that your needs are met in all ways, like really being satisfied in all ways. And from there, everything just kind of flows. So, of course, things in the bedroom improve, but it was really around connecting to myself and my own sexuality. And that was just so mind boggling to me that I had never been taught any of these things. And I thought, why? Why are we never taught these things? I certainly wasn't. And I learned so much that I was blown. I am a very well educated woman and I was still learning things that just like, oh my gosh. So at that moment, I was like, everyone needs to know this. And I just decided I was going to figure out how to become certified in this work. And so I've taken numerous certifications, one with my mentor that I first took her program, Layla Martin. And it's just been such a rewarding thing because often people, wonder why sexuality, Amanda, why have all the things? But I truly believe it is a huge part of our holistic well-being, right? Because when things aren't going well in this area, it does affect everything.
Yes, I would agree. And it's such a bigger life lesson. I mean, the things you spoke about that you found through the gateway of sexuality were like connecting with yourself and your needs and learning how to express yourself and know what feels good and makes you happy. I mean, it's sexuality, but it's also bigger than sex,
Yes,
right? Like
yes.
that can carry over to all areas of life
Yes.
and being happy and satisfied and healthy. So for women out there, I mean, what would be your starting point of advice and tips for women? Where do they start?
Sometimes it's a very basic level of where do we start? Because often when I work with women, they have, of course, everyone wants the lofty goals of, multiple orgasms and great sex and all the things. And that's definitely part of it. But a lot of times it's kind of rewinding a little bit and just noticing, okay, where on a base level, 0 is like, I never feel like my desires are being met. 10 is like, oh yeah, I'm totally living a pleasure filled life. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Right? Because oftentimes I see that, especially specifically women, we are very conditioned to give and to take care of everyone else and to put ourselves at the bottom of the list. So that first question is, where are you when you feel that when it comes to getting your desires met, where are you on that scale? And if you're low, just taking a moment to say, well, that's okay, because it's understandable that in this culture, I would have not put my needs first. And really start tuning in to, what are the things that light me up? What are the things that make me feel good in my body? What are the things that light up my senses? Right? And it can be that simple to start.
Yes, I love it. Step 1 is always awareness of where we're at,
Yeah.
which may be a rude
Yeah.
awakening. And what about I mean, there's women out there that might be single and not have a partner. It sounds like they could start in the same place and
Exactly.
do this on their own, right?
Yes. And I highly encourage, no matter if you are single, if you're in a partnership, this work is for anyone because really it is about coming home to yourself and what you need. Like, what are the things? What are your desires? What are the things that light you up? And if you don't know, then I invite you to just get out a piece of paper and a timer and set it for 10 minutes and just write down all the things that you want. Every single thing. Like, do not censor yourself because that is a very hard thing for many of my clients because when you ask them what they want, they don't know. And that's a true thing, right?
Yes, I would agree. In many areas of life, it's important to have clarity and get clear
Yes.
on what it is that we want. So are there certain practices beyond that women can do to start to, tap in and
Yes.
get lit up in a sexual way?
Yes. And I think, part of it is when you start seeing those things that you want and start letting yourself have them in whatever small way. Like, right, maybe you want a trip to Bora Bora, but that might not be realistic. So you can think, what could give me that sense of freedom for an hour, for 10 minutes, right? It's kind of like what's beneath that. And the more you start letting yourself tap into those things, the more it's easier to receive what you want. Because that's a big part of it is number one, knowing what you want. Number two, being able to voice it. And number three, being able to receive it. And so when it comes to like just starting to give yourself those little things, it opens up that receptivity, which is a big part of enjoying sexual experiences or just your sensuality in general. And so kind of when you follow that path, you kind of start being, maybe if you're a 0 on that list from 0 to 1 to 10, as I mentioned earlier, you might find yourself more like in the middle. And you just go about your day feeling a little more fulfilled and a little more turned on by life, so to speak, because really all those things that light you up, it all adds up. Then what I also encourage is really taking a moment each day to tap into your sensuality by 3 or 5 senses. right? And this is a beautiful just presence, mindfulness practice anyway, right? So maybe if you are in an experience that you're enjoying, is just take a moment and pause and just drop in and say, okay, what am I doing right now that I'm enjoying? Like, what are the emotions that I'm feeling? Perhaps what am I noticing on my body, or am I touching something that feels good? What are the smells I'm enjoying? What might I be hearing, or what might be being said to me, or what might I be saying? What might I be tasting? Right? What all this, just like really taking a moment to write those things down. And I like to, call it a pleasure journal, if you will. So every day you write down these things that bring you joy and pleasure in your senses.
Ooh, I like that. A pleasure journal. Well, I just think it's great that this is so much more than like what's happening in the bedroom and how it applies across all life and finding our joy and what lights us up. And how also I think we can get fixated on the way things that we want, and maybe there's other littler way, like if we, like you were mentioning, focus in on the quality of what you're looking for, and maybe you're not going to go out and maybe we think we can't go have that trip to Bora Bora, but maybe there's other ways to fulfill that desire that we're not thinking about. So letting ourselves be a little flexible, think outside of the box, tap into like the deeper part of that desire, and like all the ways in which it could be fulfilled. Maybe it's not exactly what we think it's going to look like. Maybe it's not $1 million in the bank, but it's, something else that we're
Yeah.
seeking.
And those little things really translate to the bedroom, because when you start noticing, okay, these are the things I enjoy, maybe you can even do like a little bedroom inventory and look around and say, okay, is my bedroom a place of pleasure? Or is it like filled with junk, or like piles of things that need to go somewhere else, or dirty laundry and kids' toys everywhere? And if so, that's okay, because we all have those days. But also noticing, how could you create a little bit more of a sacred environment in your bedroom?
I like that too. Bedroom inventory, pleasure journal. I'm writing it down.
Because the more you start tuning in, okay, these are the things I like, then you can look around your bedroom and say, you know what, I really don't think that having the TV in here is the best thing. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I find um, when there's no electronics in the bedroom, there's a lot more opportunity for other types of connecting, whether or not you are single or with someone else. So that's just another reminder there. The same thing when it comes to your five senses, because oftentimes what I hear from so many clients is it's a really hard to get out of my head during sex, right? I'm always thinking about the next thing I have to do, or the list and the laundry list of things that are always going to be there, right? So using those tools of like, okay, now I've gotten more practice at dropping into my senses, so I can do that in those moments when I find my mind wandering, and coming back into, okay, what is feeling good right now? What am I noticing that feels good? And how can I bring my awareness into what feels good? And maybe take a breath or two, into what feels good. Yeah.
And it's really up to us. I think a lot of times we externalize like, oh, well, blaming it on something else. But it's really up to us to find our joy and tap into the awareness of what is pleasurable, and to luxuriate in that and accentuate that in our daily lives, right?
Yes, definitely.
Wonderful. And what would you say? I mean, I know your focus is on women, but for the men out there, it sounds like this also could apply. Or is there other advice that you'd give to the men out there?
Yeah, I think you know what the piece that we're speaking to here is a lot around presence and being in the moment and noticing moment to moment what's happening in my body, what's happening in this moment. Because for so many, if you, and speaking specifically to heterosexual relationships here, but oftentimes what I hear so much from women is they just want more presence in their lovemaking, right? They want more presence from their partner. And when you are in the moment, so all these tools can definitely apply to men. When you're in the moment, it can be so much easier to connect. You can really be present with one another and be aware of what your partner is doing. Like, what might they want? You can have those things like what feels good to you, and checking in. Like, I think having those conversations sometimes outside of the bedroom can be important. But one of the things that is really important when you're in the moment is just communicating. Like, does that feel good? Are you liking this? Or just checking in, right? Would something else be better? And also being able to speak to that for both people, right? Because oftentimes we don't want to hurt our partner's feelings, or we feel like we can talk about everything, but when it comes to the moment, the words just won't come out. And so, again, why it's so important on your own to be tuning into what I like, what feels good. And then you can more communicate that to your partner.
Wonderful. I guess, well, are there any other starting points for people, or because I also want to like dig into a little advanced level stuff?
Yes, of course. No, I do feel like, these are kind of always some of the starting points, I think,
Okay.
is just getting the baseline of, okay, what do I want? What feels good? And you can also do this through your own, I love a sensual self care practice, I like to call it. So this is where you take time every day to do something to nourish your body, right? It could be self pleasure. It could be just, being a little more mindful when you're putting your lotion on. It could be, any way to tap into what feels good in my body right now. And how can I just allow that? How can I just be with what feels good? Because it's so easy for our minds to go elsewhere. But when we can really focus on pleasure, that can change how our default goes, right? We can more default to what feels good. And so I would say those are kind of some basic steps. And, along that lines, there's often, kind of maybe more emotional level things, right? So it's always important to just know, okay, what are my general thoughts and feelings around sex in general? Like, what were the messages I got coming along? Are they serving me now or are they not? What would I love my sex life to look like? If I could have everything exactly as I desired, what would that look like? And just having some time, creating that um, desire in your mind so that then you can start knowing what you want to work towards it, right? So those are kind of the base level things I would say.
Yes, because imagination creates our reality ultimately. So we got to
Exactly.
start imagining.
Yeah. And then you can feel into what's coming up when you feel into that. You're like, oh, well, I have this desire to be fully loved in all ways. And I can totally relax and surrender when my partner is doing things to me and I'm out of my head and I'm really just enjoying every moment. And then you can see what happens when you put that visualization in your mind and you're like, oh, but I'm like feeling this clawing in my chest when I think about that. Then you can spend some time like, well, what is going on there? Maybe it's maybe it's shame, maybe it's other experiences in your life, right? So much can come up. So it's often too taking time to be with what's coming up in resistance to my desire. What's coming up that's making me feel like I can't have that? And just getting a little curious about what those things could be. Like what might those things have to say? What might those things need so that you can move forward and get kind of more of you on board with, okay, this is what I want. So what can I do to like hold the pieces of me that might not want that yet?
Yes, that's a good
And be
point.
compassionate towards yourself along the way, right?
I'd say many people do have a certain degree of blocks potentially that are going to come up. So the way to
Yeah.
deal with these blocks, as you said, is just to be aware of them and
Yeah. And just be compassionate towards those things that come up.
mhm.
And just is, I think self-compassion is the number one key to moving forward and healing when it comes to sexuality, because um, it's so easy to be hard on ourselves and
Mhm.
it's so easy to want things to be different, but trusting that the timing is the way it needs to be, trusting that everything is happening in a way that serves you, right? And so we can only go as fast as the slowest parts of us want to go. And I love that phrase because it really is so true. So the more you can just be compassionate, being like, wow, it's really uncomfortable for me to try to self pleasure. What is that about? Well, maybe when I was a kid, I got in trouble for doing that once. Okay, well, that would make sense why it's hard for me now,
Mhm.
right? So how could I make an environment where it does feel good for me to explore my body in a way that feels safe and comfortable, right? And those can be like little ways to nourish those, the shame or what else might arise as you are on the path to greater pleasure.
Pleasure in all of life. So I think I'm getting the
Mm-hmm.
connection and it's really cool, but is there anything more you want to speak to about like how our sexuality and tapping into the pleasure there does fuel our personal growth and our overall health and well-being? Because that's such a
Yes.
cool connection and statement and, view.
Yes. And what I love, a lot of my training has been around kind of using your sexual energy to nourish yourself. And I love this. A lot of this comes from the Taoist philosophy. And in particular, some of my teachers studied directly with Mantak Chia, who was a
Oh,
big
yes.
proponent of bringing these teachings to the US. And so one of the things I love is one of my teachers, Minka DeVos, and talks about kind of really using that for your own nourishment of your body, right? And these are things that often we're not taught, but there's very simple ways and practices to learn to kind of use your turn on, so to speak, use your sexual energy just for overall vitality, right? And I think even Napoleon Hill talks about it in Think and Grow Rich. It's not a new concept at all. It goes way, way back. That's what I think I love about ancient things, right? Is usually if they've made it to this day and age, there's a reason behind it.
Yeah. Well,
But
and we have the
I
Kama
just
Sutra from thousands of years ago.
exactly, yes.
We've been having sex
And so
forever.
exactly, we are here because of sex,
Yeah.
right?
It's
It is a very
important.
important thing.
Very important.
Yes. But I do just want to honor and name the lineage that a lot of my teachings came from, because I think that's important. And while I am just, I feel like most people are only scratching the surface of the pleasure that we could connect with.
Yes.
Right. I feel like so.
Well, and that's interesting because I've done some Qigong studies and done some Montauk Chia studies,
Yes.
but it was more for spiritual development versus the sexual Tantra stuff. So, but they overlap, correct?
They do. Because really, when you think about it, we have our sexual energy. We have so many different energy centers in our body, depending on what philosophy that you are connecting with. But really, if you want to simplify it into kind of three main ones, like our sexual energy is like in our kidneys and our sexual organs. We have our heart energy, and we have our spiritual energy, right? And so when they're all connected and when they're all flowing, we're going to thrive in all areas of our lives. But it can be very common that we have blocks in one of the areas. And oftentimes, too, when it comes to spiritual growth, that is a beautiful thing. And I think one of the things I love about sexuality work is it takes that spirituality and brings it into the body, right? So not only are you just meditating or whatnot, but you're also in the present moment in this body and able to enjoy what this physical body what you can get from that and what you can receive from your own physical body too.
Yes. So you mentioned the three energy centers. What's a way to connect them and get the energy flowing between all three areas?
Yes.
I know that's probably a lot of practice, but what's, the starting point for that we can share with people?
Yeah, of course. And actually can be really simple. And do you want me? I can even walk you through like a quick
Let's do it.
mini
Oh, yeah.
practice if you
All
want.
right. Is everyone
Okay.
getting comfortable in a seated position and closing their eyes?
Yeah. So just get comfortable. And you just notice what feels good for you, how you want to sit, what feels good. If you'd like to close your eyes or keep them open, whatever your body wants. And just maybe take a moment and bring your awareness to your low belly, to your pelvic bowl, maybe to your genitals, your perineum, if that feels okay to you. And just start by taking some breaths into this space as if this space could actually breathe. And as you bring your awareness and your breath to this space, maybe just noticing any sensations that you might be aware of, just getting curious, what is here? And a sensation can be anything. It can be a heat, a cold, a compression, a tingling, a bubbly feeling, a swirling, whatever is there. Just be curious. And notice how, if it feels doable for you, how it feels to maybe squeeze and release the muscles of your pelvic floor. And you can do that by simply squeezing like you're holding in pee and poop at the same time, like just squeeze and release. And just notice as you do that, maybe there's a speed that feels good, or just even as you do, if there's any sensation you notice, maybe any activation, and maybe there is, maybe there isn't, that's okay. But if you do, whatever you feel, maybe just taking a breath into that. And I like to sometimes use the visual of like a ball of energy or a ball of light, maybe like a pearl ball. And as you notice the sensation, perhaps just visualizing that there at your perineum, maybe allowing it to get bigger with every breath, kind of like oxygen to a fire, so to speak. And then you can take your breath and just kind of, as you breathe, bring that ball up into your heart area. And you can relax your pelvic floor if you'd like. Or if it feels good, you can keep squeezing it. But as you do, just keep, now you're going to be moving your awareness to your chest. And just noticing if you could pull that energy up into your chest, into your heart, maybe allowing it to swirl there. And breathing in and out of your heart and your chest. And just noticing what might be present here in your chest, in your heart. Any sensations, whatever you might notice or not notice is okay. I'm just noticing if there was a quality to this energy. What might you notice? The sensations in your chest, just what might be there. Now again, you can imagine that ball of energy or the sphere of energy or however it feels good to imagine it. You can just breathe it now up into the top of your head, into your third eye or pineal gland, however you want to relate to that space. And again, bringing your breath, your awareness to the space. And as you do, you can again get curious, any sensations you notice, anything present here. And there's no right or wrong way to do this, so just trust what's happening. Maybe noticing if this energy would swirl in this area, that ball of energy, how it might want to move. And then you can take another breath and bring it back down to your heart, your chest. Take another breath and bring it back down into your low belly, your genitals, your pelvic bowl. And then as you start to bring your awareness back, just maybe noticing if you feel anything different, if you were able to connect it all to the energy moving. And sometimes that does take practice, but that can just be a simple way to just kind of bring the awareness of those parts, bring the energy up and then back down, and kind of notice if you feel any different in your body and your being.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes, I'm buzzing. I'm feeling it. Woo! Okay, get back
Beautiful.
here.
One thing too, if you feel like you still have too much energy moving, you can always just putting your feet on the ground and just kind of maybe rubbing your feet on the ground. If you want to keep it swirling, that's beautiful. You can let it nourish your body. Or if you feel like it's too much, you can always just like imagine it rolling back out of your feet into the earth and letting it be recycled there if it feels too much.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I love
You're
interactive
welcome.
experiences for the podcast. It's good.
Yay.
So let's talk about Tantra, because I think that's a perhaps mysterious term for people that haven't studied it. So what is it, and what are some of the practices? And I definitely want to talk about that jade egg thing, which I've heard about before.
Yes, of course. And one of the things is really when it comes to Tantra, it's a very rich tradition, right? And it's typically when we think about sexuality, when it comes to Tantra, it's definitely more neo-tantric kind of teachings, which is really around finding the kind of the connectedness in everything and the consciousness in everything, and really finding that spirituality in all the things that maybe were once taboo, right? So that can be a lot about it. So, it's a mystical and practical religious tradition that it peaked in India around 1000 AD and had a wide ranging impact on Asian religious traditions in general. So, traditionally, the traditional tantric practices, you might even recognize things like hatha loa. hatha yoga, right? And kundalini mantras, that kind of thing, being directly initiated from a guru and all this, that, and the other. But what you think nowadays, when people hear Tantra and kind of relate sex and Tantra together, that's kind of a neo-tantric approach that was a modern form developed mostly by Osho, which you might have seen in Wild Wild Country. And he had some, questionable things, but also some really good things. And what I think one of the things I've learned in this type of work is kind of separating the teachings from the teacher, right? Because there's a lot of not safe teachers out there in this kind of world. So you really have to look for that and make sure that you are feeling safe and comfortable with whoever you're learning from, just on a side note. But practices like breath work, like meditation, allowing sounds and all those things, kind of using your body to express in deeper ways to kind of realize that deeper truth of divinity within you.
Well, let's talk about the jade egg practice.
Yes. And
because I do
the jade
have
egg,
a specific question about that, but go ahead and explain it for everyone out there first.
Yes. And the jade egg is actually more of the Taoist lineage. So kind of coming from China.
Oh, okay. Different than the tantric lineage.
Yes.
Okay.
And so in the tradition, the ancient tradition, this was used supposedly for like the concubines and, a more of the royal elite to nourish their sexual energy and vitality, because a big part of that tradition is using your energy to nourish yourself. And so the intention behind using a jade egg is that you are working with a stone to kind of give you a focal point. I also love the fact that it's round, so it's a very feminine type of thing, which I enjoy, and that you use that to kind of get the energy flowing. And traditionally, jade is a very yang stone, and the uterus and the vagina is very yin, often like watery, and there's a lot of emotions and things. So I think the original use for the jade was to kind of balance out the energies. But what I love about it is, first of all, there's wrong ways to do it and the right ways to do it. So I can speak to that. But one of the things that can be great about it is it's just like a practice devoted to your own sexuality, which is a beautiful thing, because there's not many things out there that have kind of more of a sacred relationship to it. In my opinion, I really do appreciate that sacredness of, I'm going to do a practice that's just around nourishing my own sexual energy for myself. And that is the only reason.
Yes. And
I get to choose what kind of flavor I want. Like maybe I want it to be healing. Maybe I want it to be pleasurable. Maybe I want it to be sexy. Maybe I want it to be wild. Whatever it is, I get to pick, and it's just for me. So I do love that about it. It also, when used properly, can, strengthen the pelvic floor. You want to make sure, though, if you do have any major prolapse or anything like that, that you're working with the pelvic floor PT to ensure that you're doing the exercises properly. Because, I think some people out there are touting about the jade egg. Oh, you just put it in and walk around and miracles happen. And that's actually not true. And it's unsafe for your pelvic floor to be walking around or sleeping in it. So typically, if you're doing the traditional practice, it's about maybe 20 minutes max that you would be having the egg inside, if your body chooses to work with it or not. And that's always part of it too, is making sure you get a yes or a no from your body. So, but yes, that's kind of my general thoughts on the jade egg. And I'd love to hear what questions you might have.
Okay. Well, here's my question, and it's kind of funny and it might be embarrassing, but for people that haven't been to my house, I have a lot of gemstones in my house. And as I was getting ready for this podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, I have these jade eggs on my shelf, and I'm wondering if this is what I would actually use. Is this it?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. When it comes to like crystals specifically for internal use, there are companies that specifically do that, because the way that they are made and the way that they are sanded and whatnot, you would just want to make sure it's safe for internal use. So I could not
We're
tell
not
you,
sure.
I don't know where those were manufactured.
Well, I didn't know if I had bought these gemstones not knowing what I was buying was my question, because gosh darn it, it looks like a jade egg practice.
It sure does. It sure does. It does. And so that's a good point. The one thing I would the caveat is, there's all kinds of stones out there, and there's all kinds of places where you can get them. So I would just try to make sure that it is meant for internal use.
Okay, that's good to know. And I also I have these littler ones that are rose quartz,
Yes.
which I could see the benefits of rose quartz. And then I have
Yes.
a clear quartz one.
Yes. I love
You
it.
guys, I am ready. Look at
You are ready. Dr. Sarah, you are ready.
It may or may not be safe. We're not sure if they're the correct ones, but I have 5 eggs here.
And I think you can,
ladies, come over. Let's get going.
you could always just make sure that it's not, sharp or has anything.
No,
like
they
that.
feel very solid and smooth, and they feel pretty good. I'm an adventurer and a try things out kind of gal, so I might just do it.
Yes. And the thing I love, I would just recommend boiling them on a low boil for 10 minutes before you use it the first time.
Dust them off would be good. Yes.
Yes. Just make sure that they're clean. One of the things, and this is funny because I actually have a quartz egg right here because I was just teaching a class the other day. But what I like about some of the ones that are specifically meant for,
yes, I see.
They have a hole drilled.
Yes,
you don't need a hole drill, but sometimes that just makes it easier to get out.
Yeah, well, you don't want to end up in the hospital with it stuck up there and talking to the doctor how you got a egg that you need removed.
Yes, it's very, very rare that they, they're not going to get stuck up there. You can get them out, but I do that is, a fear often people have. I'm like, oh, you can't get lost inside. But the thing that's cool about the quartz size, because then you can kind of I love doing this with any stone I'm working with, but putting your intention in it. But the thing about the quartz is that you can kind of charge it with whatever you want.
Oh,
right?
So nice.
That's kind of fun.
The clear quartz.
Yeah.
This one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to go. I got one for every day of the week. 20 minutes max, though, you said, right?
Yes.
That's good.
And there is specific ways to do it. Like there's, I actually have a basic practice that I could send you, because you want to make sure that that's one of the things I do feel like it's important to learn how to use it properly. So you don't cause more harm than good. But like with any sex toy, you can have fun with it, right? It doesn't have to be for anything else than just fun.
Yes.
Right? Just get curious.
Yes. And the benefits of the jade egg practice, again, is when you insert that vaginally, share again what it's going to do.
Yes. Well, first of all, when you are so many times for specifically women, vulva owners, there has been a lot of penetration without a full body yes, right? And so that can be something where even if you're with a loving partner and you're just like not really in the mood, but you say yes when you don't really mean to, yes, there's responsive desire. So sometimes, it's like, oh, let me get in the mood and then I'll feel like I want to. But just in general, like when you override your body's yes and no, that can create problems and pain and all kinds of things. So part of the process is like really being with yourself and letting your body let you know, is it a yes or a no? And you can tell, because if there's a yes, then your body kind of invites, there's kind of an invitation for you to insert it. And if it's a no, you'll know because your body will like, doesn't want it in or it will shoot it back out. So but it's a good practice to get into. And so not only that, then it builds sensate focus because you have, a lot of times when you first start working with the egg, you might not even feel it because, and in general, the internal walls of the vagina aren't super sensitive. So, but you can increase the sensate focus by working with the egg because you can start to have more awareness and it does increase sensitivity. And so also when you're kind of doing the squeezes, then you can strengthen your pelvic floor if you're doing it properly. So those are some of the benefits that I see. And also too, just having that emotional connection to something that's all around your sexuality where you can really create a fun and pleasurable relationship that's just for you. And of course, the people around you benefit, right? When you are lit up and turned on. So, yes.
I love it. Any time of day is good?
Any time of day. Yeah. I always, my favorite place to practice is in the bathtub because I have,
oh, that's nice.
That's the only room in our house that has a lock on it. And so often I will just go take a bath and that's my alone time. And everyone knows not to bug me.
Yes.
My kids know, like, don't come in unless you're bleeding. And yeah, so anytime
love it
suits you.
So I have different questions. What are your thoughts? And this is kind of on the side here about monogamy versus polyamory. Like there's so many different types of relationships. And I think, hey, whatever people want to do whatever's good and lights them up is kind of my philosophy on it. And it
Yes.
can go either way, just as long as you're
Yes.
true to yourself about, what's good for you. But yeah, what do you think about all of the different relationship styles
Yeah.
that are out there?
I think I am with you, Dr. Sarah. I really do feel like whatever you enjoy is perfect, right? As long as it's consenting adults, anything goes. And I think that's one of the things is that often it's being true to yourself. Like, what really do you want? What makes you feel happy? What makes you feel fulfilled? And going with that. And also honoring if it's not what your partner wants, right? Because there are always ways to have these conversations if you are in a monogamous relationship and you want to open it, or if you are in an open relationship and want it to be monogamous, or if there's numerous ways that you want to find your relationships come together. It's really around what I think is the number one key with any relationship is, as we said back in the beginning, what is it that you need? Can you communicate what you need and can you receive what you need? And those are easier said than done a lot of times.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love how this, as I said at the beginning, is such a gateway for a huge life lesson around all the areas of life. Just, it's, yeah, beyond sex, but being lit up and joyful and acknowledging our desires and needs in all areas of life so that we can be satisfied and fulfilled in every way.
Yes.
So
Yes.
perfect. Um, Amanda, any other burning thoughts about this topic? We could go on and on, but we'll have
I
to end the
know.
podcast soon. So any other things that the
Yes.
audience needs to hear about today?
Well, I think this is such a good question too. From like, are you satisfied? It is really asking yourself that question when it comes to sex, because that can give you so much good information. And if you're not satisfied, know that there's things to do about it. Because I know, oftentimes I hear so common is, maybe my partner has more desire than me, or I have more desire than my partner. And how do we come together in these situations? And it all comes down to being able to know what you want and ask for it, and maybe getting creative with one another. I think I love the term, just kind of creating these play dates with one another where you can play and explore and try new things, really be able to be like children playing. You know what I'm saying? Like when they're just being curious about something. As adults, we lose that curiosity oftentimes. And sex is this beautiful playground for adults, right? That's how we play. And it can be such a fun way of bringing pleasure and receiving pleasure. And so if you're not getting what you want in that area, maybe taking some time to figure out what do you want and how can you get it, right? Because there are ways, and sometimes relationships. I work with a lot of couples that have been in relationships for 20 years, and they're like, I am not satisfied,
Yes.
and they might not have asked for what they wanted for 20 years. So it takes time to change the patterns, but it can be done, right? And a lot of times, this is the great thing about sex is so much of it is learned skills.
Yes.
So practicing something new, learning a new skill, dealing with all the parts that might be coming up that are emotional, right? Maybe resentments or pain or all the things that can happen because it's a deep well sometimes when it comes to pleasure. And so really celebrating every little bit, doing your pleasure practices every day. It could be doing the pleasure journal or just taking those moments to drop in and feel good in your body and let your senses drop into that. It can be such simple ways to build up to that more satisfaction overall.
I love it. And yeah, I mean, just for a personal reveal, I will acknowledge that I've just been single a long time and through this
Yeah.
pandemic especially. And
Yes.
so I've kind of just put that aside, but this is great because there's so many activities I could do. Like I've been really just like, "Oh, well, I'm single, so none of that's
Yeah.
happening," but that's not true. Like it's up to me to create my own daily pleasure and sensuality and
Yes.
sexuality. So, that's inspiring. Thank you from
You're so
all the
welcome.
single ladies out there. Let's get to it.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. It's like whether you are single or in a partner, I highly recommend, finding your own sensual self-care practices. I mentioned earlier, like what are the things that make you feel good? If you were to have your own self-pleasure practice, what would that look like in a way that like you adore and makes you feel so good, because it does light you up. There are the more you use it, the more it flourishes, right? Like anything. If you want it to flourish, you have to give it time, attention, and nourishment. Our sexuality, our bodies, everything.
Oh,
So,
that's good too.
yeah.
For everything.
Yes.
To nourish and flourish.
Yeah.
Amanda, a few final questions.
Yes.
What's your favorite place to visit in the world?
Oh, that's a good question. I love nature so much. So anywhere where I can be in nature lights me up. If it's the mountains, if it's the ocean, like exploring new terrain. Oh, I love that
Yes.
so much.
And what's a misconception people have about you?
Probably that I'm super kinky, and I'd probably be slightly vanilla when it comes to sexual explorations. Like, I am open to everything, but for the most part, it's not as wild as you might think, but it is
Yes.
very good.
Oh, and that brings me back to the original question in my mind when you were sharing how you grew up. So what's your family thinking about your job now and profession?
Yes. Well, it's actually, they're so supportive. My dad actually died in 2008, but my mom is super supportive. And she is always like, you know what? I just wish I would have had someone like you when I was young.
That's
Right.
so sweet. Oh my
And
gosh.
I got the sweetest message from one of my dad's good friends. And it was the nicest thing on Facebook. And he wrote me this note. He's like, I just have to say, your dad would be so proud of you. He might not understand what you're doing, but he would be very proud. And that just touched my heart. I was like,
Oh,
yes.
that makes me teary. That's so sweet. Oh, good.
Yeah.
What's one word you would use to describe you? It's not kinky,
Juicy.
I guess. Juicy. And what's your hope and vision for our world as we step into our future?
Well, right now it's that, one of the things when it comes to women's sexual liberation is having, and I will just say it's having choice of what to do with that pleasure. And if it ends up in a pregnancy, right? Because I think being able to have autonomy over our bodies is very important. So I just hope that continues. That will be
Yes.
what I have to say about that.
Amen. Well,
Yes.
Amanda, it's been so wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. If people want to connect with you further, where can they go?
Yes, the best place to find me is, as Dr. Sarah mentioned, I do have a podcast. It's called Find Your Feminine Fire Podcast. You can also find me at my website, which is amandatesta.com. And I do have a little sensuality practice that you can download that can kind of help walk you through that five senses dropping in I mentioned earlier. And you can get that at amandatesta.com/sensuality.
Okay, wonderful. We'll put those links in the show notes for easy access for everyone. Thank you so much, and I'll see you later.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Are You Satisfied podcast. Links for any mentions from this episode are available in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with me, go to drsarahmurphy.com. That's drsarahmurphy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. Definitely tell all your friends about it and leave a review. See you next week.